Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. 1 in 10 Americans suffer with diabetes, while 1 in 3 are pre-diabetic. On this show, we look at some of the main reasons why these numbers are not getting better, but actually getting worse. Bob and Rollie go over the 2 different types of diabetes and the tests you will want to take to find out if you are at risk of developing it. They also share some great techniques you can use to naturally regulate blood sugar and the inflammation that causes it. So sit back, relax, and get ready to live forever young.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Live Forever Young Radio. I'm Bob Gilpatrick. I'm here with Rollie Culp. Rollie, how are you doing today?
Good, Bob. How's it going, man?
All right. So this is a topic, diabetes, that is something that almost everyone is interested to know more about because either they themselves have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and if not, they certainly know someone who does. Almost half of the people in the country are getting to the point where their blood sugar is getting too high from insulin sensitivity and getting towards needing medical help for their diabetes. So this is a really, really big issue. The good news is that with enough information about the proper way to take care of yourself, this doesn't have to be an issue for almost everyone that has the type of information we're going to provide today.
Yeah, it's funny you say a lot of people look for information about it. That's very true. We have a lot of people that call in and talk about their husband or a family member that has it and how they can help them. So I think it's very good to go over that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. It's almost like when someone calls to our office and starts talking to us, you like within 20 or 30 seconds, you can say to them, do you have diabetes?
Right. Yeah,
and
it's true.
Because they're telling you, I'm having trouble with my eyes. My doctor told me I'm having trouble with my kidneys. I've got numbness in my feet.
Yeah, the tingling and stuff.
Yeah. And then when we ask them, do you have diabetes? They just nonchalantly go, oh, yeah. Almost like, doesn't everybody?
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's almost kind of like a normal thing, even though they don't realize that that's probably not helping.
Yeah. Now, one of the biggest issues with diabetes that we see, which leads to some more good news, is when people have diabetes, they tend to get very high inflammation in their body.
Correct.
And this is what's causing the issues that are these symptoms and medical problems that people get.
Right.
So if people are getting poor circulation to their extremities and peripheral neuropathy, damage to the nerves in their hands and feet, and they're also getting trouble with their eyes, their kidneys, maybe even gastroparesis, which is a hard time moving the food along in your alimentary canal, right?
That doesn't sound
it's like a paralysis of your intestines. And this happens quite often later on as people have had diabetes for a while. But these things are being caused by inflammation. So the inflammation is creating the damage.
Right.
So later we'll talk about what exactly can you do not only to lower your blood sugar, but also to lower your inflammation. Even if your blood sugar won't come all the way down to where you would want it,
right,
you can lower your inflammation all the way down. And we do know people who have diabetes and have not been able to get their blood sugar down, but because of what we've been able to do to help them, their inflammation came all the way down and all their symptoms of being diabetic have gone away.
Right, because the inflammation is like the stem of the problem, right? That's where it all comes from. And the inflammation, I think, especially because they're diabetic, that extra sugar adds and creates, we talk about it a lot, the free radicals, right?
Yes. So when you have extra sugar in your bloodstream, it doesn't just sit there harmlessly.
No.
It actually combines with proteins in your blood, which you went to a lot of trouble to make, right? Your body's a protein making machine.
Right.
You make 100,000 different proteins, and they're used for every aspect of human life. And you have to go to a lot of trouble to make those proteins from your genetic code, you have to have the enzymes, you have to have the amino acids, and you have to have your RNA functioning properly. And then you go to all this trouble, and now the protein gets bumped into by sugar. And it's now no longer a good protein.
Like it
because
runs into it like a bumper car.
It's called glycation. And now that protein no longer can function properly.
Oh, man.
And in the process of that collision, it throws off a molecule of superoxide, which is a highly, highly volatile reactive oxygen species, also known as a free radical.
Okay.
And this is what's causing damage to your body.
So it's kind of like when they hit, some sparks fly off, and those sparks is what's going to be a negative reaction inside your body that causes further inflammation and damage.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So now there's two different types of diabetes. You have type 1 and type 2.
Right. My dad has diabetes. He has type 1. And that's where it's weird, though. He had a late onset type 1. Actually, when I was being born in the hospital, he was in the hospital because he had gone into a diabetic comatose, I think is what they call it, a diabetic coma, right around the time I was born. And he didn't realize he was diabetic at all. But one of the things he was saying was that he couldn't get enough to drink. He would drink a ton of orange juice, and he was constantly thirsty. He was always going to the bathroom before he realized it. And then right around the time I was born, he had an issue. He had an episode, and they diagnosed him with type 1 diabetes at like 30-something years old, which is not very normal.
Yeah, that also happened to a relative of mine,
Oh.
right around the same age.
Really?
Yeah, and I also had another relative who became type 1 diabetic at age 5 years old.
Okay.
Right, so sometimes it happens really young, sometimes not till later in life. And in these cases, the theories are that sometimes people can get a virus that can damage cells in their pancreas, or sometimes an autoimmune attack. And an autoimmune attack can be caused by many different things, including stress and including infection in your gut, things like that.
Wow.
And so when people get type 1 diabetes, the cells that produce insulin in their pancreas stop producing insulin, and sometimes the cells even die off. And so now you're not producing insulin, which has to be involved in the metabolic pathway that allows you to utilize sugar as fuel efficiently. And when you can no longer do that, you get very high blood sugar. It's a life-threatening situation.
Right. No, it is.
People have to have insulin shots or an insulin
My whole childhood, I remember my dad always having to carry around his black bag with his insulin in it, and his tester, and he'd have to prick his finger. Now they have technology; he doesn't have to do that. He's got the little thing under his arm, and he scans it, so it's not quite as bad. But he's been able to manage it. He's 71. No, 71.
71.
He's 71, and he still works every day. So, and he uses the products. He uses the Barley, and he uses the resveratrol. And he says those two, he used to have real painful hands and everything. He says the resveratrol really helps with that.
Yeah, so later on we'll talk about some of the modern day discoveries in the world of nutraceutical science that help people with diabetes in many different ways.
So we were talking about type 1. What happens with type 2?
So type 2 diabetes comes along slowly as you get older and as you have certain lifestyle things that are going to contribute to it. So the main one is a poor diet.
Right.
So people will eat a diet that's very high in carbohydrates and not enough good fats and not enough protein and not enough nutrients. And so, for example, there's a very close correlation between low levels of vitamin D3 and diabetes. And then also another direct correlation between people eating very high carbohydrate diets leads to type 2 diabetes over time.
That's because that carbohydrates are actually sugar.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So essentially what happens is if you're taking in too much sugar, you can't utilize all of it for fuel, right? So some of it then gets converted into fat. And then another phenomena happens where you're secreting insulin from your pancreas, which is a hormone that helps the sugar drop down into the cells.
Okay.
Right? But when you have all of this sugar and you keep secreting more and more insulin, your cell will get resistant to that insulin, and because there's insulin receptors on the cell.
Okay.
And when there's so much insulin, you get resistant to it. Okay. And so this they call insulin resistance.
Yeah,
so
I've heard a lot about that lately.
And then the more resistant that you get, the more fat you create from the sugar.
Oh.
And so as you get
no
more fat, and particularly belly fat, okay, the belly fat secretes more of another hormone called leptin. And leptin is the hormone that tells you when you're full. So people will be eating dinner, and at some point they feel full. This is because the leptin that's being secreted from your fat cells is telling your brain it's time to stop eating.
Okay.
Right? But if you start producing a lot more leptin because you have too much fat, now your brain becomes resistant to leptin.
Oh, man.
And you overeat, you become overweight or obese, which is one of the main causes of diabetes.
Yeah.
And so it's this vicious cycle.
That is a pretty bad cycle.
Okay. Yeah. And so the other things that cause people to get type 2 diabetes, which starts out as just, pre-diabetes where your blood sugar might go up to 100 to maybe to 125. And then as it creeps up past 125, they say you have metabolic syndrome and then full-blown type 2 diabetes. Now, we had a person come to us many years ago who had gone to his doctor because he was having trouble with his eyesight. So he went to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said, hey, you need to go to your internist, your general practitioner, and get checked out because you might have diabetes, and that might be causing the problem with your eyes. Sure enough, that's what it was.
Yep.
Okay? And then we began helping him with nutrition products, and he got better and better and better as time went by, and eventually he no longer had type 2 diabetes.
And a lot of that, the eyes particularly, is because there's these mini vessels, like micro vessels, that we've talked about on a couple other shows. And like we talked about, the heart only pumps so much blood, and then it has to be undulated in, right? Pretty much. And these small vessels, with there's so much inflammation, it can't get it. So then you start to suffer. Your ocular health starts to suffer.
They're getting damaged and lack of blood flow. So the other things that people need to watch out for that cause this is also stress.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that later on, a couple of things you can do to manage stress. And the other is an aberrant gut flora, right? So your microbiome in your intestines, if it gets out of whack, too much bad bacteria, not enough good, is another correlation to getting type 2 diabetes. Also, lack of exercise, another main contributor.
Okay.
Now, in regard to poor nutrition, people that eat food that is processed foods from the grocery store, that have preservatives and trans fats and sugar to make this food preserved and to taste good, that's a huge contributor to the diet aspect. But even with that, if you were to get food from the grocery store that's whole food, that is, fruits and vegetables, okay, they've been grown in soil that has become so poor nutritionally that there's almost no nutritional value in that food. And so your body can be overfed but undernourished.
Yep, we talk about that a lot, and that's why people, they always, not just the leptin resistance, but they're not actually getting the nutrients. So when the body doesn't get the nutrients, even though you've eaten something, it's still craving what you're not getting.
Yeah, and craving more because it needs more nutrition.
Exactly, right.
Okay. And so why is all of this, so bad? Because people with diabetes have much, much higher risk of strokes, heart attacks, much higher risk of getting dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, problems with your eyes, problems with your kidneys, peripheral neuropathy, and even cancer. And so for people that want to live forever young, that live a long, healthy
Forever
life,
Young Radio.
this is a place to pay very close attention.
Agreed.
Know what your numbers are. Okay, so you want to know what your fasting blood sugar is, which is a test they do for that moment of that day. And you don't want that number to be coming up close to 100. You want to keep it down below 100 in the 80 range if possible.
That's the one that my dad would test every day through his finger.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so you want to know your numbers so you know ahead of time, because half the people that are pre-diabetic, they're between 100 and 125, don't know it because they're not getting a blood test for it.
Right.
Okay? There's another blood test called A1C, and which gives you a longer look at your blood sugar. You should also know what that number is.
Right.
And you also should know what your inflammation number is.
Right.
Because if you look and you go, oh, okay, my A1C was 6 and my fasting blood sugar was 120, and my level of inflammation, my C-reactive protein, was up to 4. It's like, okay, now we definitely have a problem because that inflammation is beginning to cause damage to your body.
Systemic.
Yes,
It'll go
systemic
through the whole system.
everywhere, and it's also going to make that type of inflammation makes your coronary arteries inflamed, which leads to sticky cholesterol coating your arteries.
Don't want that. No.
And so this is why you want to pay attention. It's not just that, hey, it's not good to have high blood sugar. It's really, really bad. It's going to lead to the leading causes of death, disability, disease, if you don't pay attention.
All
to
chronic conditions.
Exactly. So what is it? So those were 3 of the tests we talked about, the A1C, CRP, and you also want to make sure you get your D3 level checked, since we know that it can lead to diabetes if it's too low.
Right.
And you also then want to make sure that you check your iron levels as well. Okay?
Yeah.
Because high iron levels will contribute to high inflammation.
Really?
And if you've already got inflammation issues from having blood sugar that's high and your iron's also high, right, then it's going to make it much worse. And so make sure that when you go for blood work that those things are tested. They're not going to always be tested for at the doctor's office. Right. The D3 usually not, iron usually not, CRP usually not, A1C usually not, unless they suspect that you have diabetes. So they'll check your fasting blood sugar, and if it's 100 or more, the next time they might check your A1C.
Really?
But you need to know those other numbers as well.
And those are good to just know in general for your health.
Yes, good to know in general, because there's other things that can create high inflammation, chronic infection, toxins, etc.
Yep.
And so it's good to know what that is.
Awesome.
So what is it that we can do? What is it that we did, like for your dad, to help him with his inflammation?
A couple different options.
Yeah. Couple of things. One was sprouted barley seeds.
Right.
So sprouted barley seeds that are stabilized, where the nutrients are stabilized right at the time that the sprouts have been stopped from their sprouting process, is going to contain high levels of a few things. One is SOD, or superoxide dismutase, which is like the holy grail of anti-inflammatory agents and the holy grail of anti-aging.
Right.
Because the higher your inflammation, the faster you're going to age.
Like a log in a fire, like you always say.
Right. And so SOD is like a Pac-Man molecule, and it's watching for these free radicals that are causing the damage, and it's neutralizing it.
Cool. Okay? So that's a little help.
Yes. Now, the other thing that is really good about these sprouted seeds is they also help with restoration and recovery. So you have to have adequate amount of amino acids and an adequate amount of metabolic enzymes in order for your body to constantly renew itself. And there's abundant amount in the sprouted seeds.
Good.
Yep. And then the other thing is because a lot of times people with diabetes are that way, because they're malnourished is, as people age, their ability to absorb nutrients diminishes because in your small intestine, where most of the absorption occurs, you have these little hairs called villi.
Right.
And as you age, they start to get coated over by a plaque.
Now the villi, they're like the fingers that actually pull the nutrients that you use
Yes.
from what you eat.
Yes.
But if they get coated over,
Then you're going to have a hard time absorbing nutrients, and that itself can lead to diabetes. Okay?
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
And so you want to be sure that you are taking in through the sprouted barley seeds, the compounds that will dissolve that plaque, move it out of your body, and revivitize the villi. Right? And so this is what occurs when people do this. And so whatever they eat, whether it's nutritional supplements or food, they'll be able to absorb the nutrients from them.
also medication too, right?
Yes, and your medications that you might need for whatever will be absorbed much more easily.
That's good.
Now, the other thing that we help people with is to make sure that your vitamin D level is
It's
up
extremely
there.
important.
Okay? There are also other antioxidants. Okay, so things like vitamin A, C, and E, they call them the ACE vitamins, and minerals like selenium and zinc, and also special compounds like glutathione and trimethylglycine, proanthocyanins, all scavenge particular free radicals or help to recharge the other free radical scavengers.
Okay.
And because it's a chain reaction, and so they all work together
Nice.
to keep your inflammation down.
All right, so it kind of sparks them on.
Yeah, and so when we worked with your dad by getting his inflammation down, that even though his A1C
Still high.
still stayed high, right? All of the negative effects of his diabetes began to go away, including his gastroparesis
Yep.
and the pain and numbness in his hands,
Right.
and the like.
He had the shaking legs. His legs would shake a lot more. They've actually reduced a lot now, but he says that and the hands, because he still works with his hands. He still does a lot of work for 71 years old. He's out there screwing stuff to the wall, putting drywall up still because he wants to stay active. And he said one of the main things that helped was with his hands, man.
Yeah.
That's always good.
Yeah.
That's if you're using that for a trade and you can get them to kind of feel better, then that only makes the day better, I guess.
Absolutely. So the other thing, of course, is exercise. A lot of people, as they begin to get overweight and diabetes, their energy level goes down. They don't feel like exercising. And so this is another good thing about having proper nutrition is your energy level goes up. So if people use our sprouted barley seeds and our Boomer Boost product, which gives people a lot more energy, now they're going to feel like exercising. And as you exercise more, your insulin resistance comes down. You'll begin to burn fat, and your leptin resistance will come down. So it makes your life a lot easier. You're not fighting this hormonal battle constantly day after day.
Yeah, it's good to know that you can, with some exercise and activity, you can help try to reverse the resistance to these different things.
Yeah. Now, the other thing is just foods in general. You have to be very careful not to eat too much sugar. So, so there's a lot of hidden sugars in different things that you wouldn't know. And there is a really great book called The Sugar Impact Diet.
Yes,
right?
we talked about that.
J.J. Virgin wrote The Sugar Impact Diet, and she gives you an outline of where the hidden sugars are and what foods you can eat instead to help to control your blood sugar.
Nice,
Okay.
nice. You know, one question we get a lot is about how to control the cravings, because a lot of people have these cravings for sugar. And I was just wondering, I guess avoiding the sugar in the first place is, but how do you get over that hump of that? It's like kind of quitting smoking. How do you get over that hump of not grabbing a soda or a chocolate bar or whatever because of the sugar that you're craving?
Yeah. So I'll tell a couple of quick tips, but there is another really great book that is called Bright Line Eating.
Okay.
And Bright Line Eating is a book all about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, sugar cravings are really difficult to get over. Let's put that out there right away.
Yeah, no, it's
when
hard.
you look at a brain scan of someone who's addicted to sugar, their brain looks worse than someone who's addicted to heroin or cocaine.
Wow.
Right? So it's a really bad addiction.
That's scary.
And we'll do a whole show about overcoming addictions.
Cool.
But just in general, people need to realize that these cravings are very real. It's not that they're somehow weak or incapable.
Right.
Okay? But what you can begin to do is some of these substitutions. Right? So let's think for a second, someone coming home from work, right? And they open up the door to their house or apartment. The first thing they do is they go to the refrigerator. They open up the refrigerator to get a little something to eat or to get something to drink. So they grab for some soda pop. 25% of all the calories in the United States consumed by drinking soda pop. Or another type of sugary drink. Or you're going to have a snack that's some crackers or a cookie, something like that. And people that get addicted to sugar, this is what they do. They're unconsciously just going straight at it. Okay? And so what you need to do is practice food habit management.
Right.
So this is where the tiny habits come in.
Yes,
Okay?
yes. We
And
talk
also-
about this on every show. It's very good.
And also tapping.
Yes.
Right? So the tiny habits, very simple, ABC. Right? A is an action that's happening for you.
Right, the triggering action.
Yeah, and they refer to it in the book as an anchoring
event.
But it's an action that you are taking.
Cool.
Okay? And so in this case, I'm opening up the refrigerator door.
That's
Okay?
a good action.
Now, the B is a behavior that you want to install that's better for you than the old behavior.
Correct.
And the C is a celebration.
Right.
Okay. So in this case, you have to do this once. You have to start and you have to make a positive intention with a solemn commitment. And you're going to say, what I'm going to drink is not this sugary drink, but instead I'm going to drink water and see if it satisfies my thirst. Right? You might want to put lemon in the water so it has some flavor.
Right.
Okay. And then that's what I'm going to do. And I am not going to eat any food because the fact of the matter is I'm not actually really hungry.
No, and dinner's just going to be in about an hour anyway. You just got to
And it's just a habit. And
Right.
so I'm going to drink some lemon water and I'm going to bag the crackers, cookies, and soda pop.
Right. That's all carbs too.
Yeah. And this is the habit. These are the types of habits that people get into who have addiction to sugar.
Right.
All right. So instead, you're going to drink your lemon water, and then you're going to celebrate.
Right.
Okay. Because what we celebrate, we tend to do more of.
Correct.
So this is behavioral psychology 101. Do a new action, celebrate. You're more likely to do it again.
Right. Positive reinforcement.
Yep. And so your celebration can be something as just simple as, yes, I did it. Great. I'm doing great.
Yep.
Okay. And this is a simple way to get started breaking your sugar habit.
Okay.
Because as you drink that water instead of sugar, you now all of a sudden are in a state physiologically where you haven't increased your blood sugar.
Right.
You haven't reinforced the addiction in your brain.
Right.
That you have to do this. Right. Now and there are the books on atomic habits, tiny habits.
Yep.
Right. Bright line eating.
Yep.
All those things, including the Sugar Impact Diet
By
book,
J.J. Virgin,
all
right.
that information is something that people will want to have.
Definitely.
Who have addiction to sugar.
We'll actually put some of those links up on liveforeveryoungradio.com for the blog portion of this podcast. So check it out, and we'll put links to it so you guys can get those references for you.
So also in regard to this habit management, you can use tapping.
Right.
So sugar addiction is very strong, so you have to have a pattern interrupt.
Right.
Okay. And one of the things to remember is the sugar addiction is bad enough on its own, but your habits that have been developed around that make it doubly worse. But the habits can be changed. And as you change the habits, your sugar addiction will begin to come down.
Okay.
So a great pattern interrupt is to use the emotional freedom technique.
Yes.
Tapping. And so in the case of going to the refrigerator, say you have this intention with your new tiny habit routine that you're going to drink some lemon water, but you just can't do it and you just really have to have that soda pop.
Yeah.
Okay?
You
This
crave
is
it.
a time when you can stop and tap.
Okay.
Okay. And when you tap on the tips of your fingers on the side of the nail, about 5 times, starting with your thumb and moving to your other fingers, you can literally stand in front of the refrigerator and tap on your fingertips and on your karate chop point, and you can repeat a phrase that would say something like this. Even though up until now I thought that I had to continue to have this habit of eating things that are bad for me every time I come home, I completely love and accept myself anyway. And I'm so grateful now that I realize I've begun to break this habit. I'm reaching for the lemon water instead, and I'm actually feeling completely peaceful about the whole thing, right? Standing in front of the refrigerator, cross your hands across your heart and breathe in. Drop your chin down to your chest, drop your hands down and breathe out. And now you've just anchored a peaceful feeling to your stated affirmation that you're feeling peaceful about drinking lemon water.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And so you can do this as many times as you want, as many times as it takes. Combine it with your ABC, celebrate your new behavior, and you're on your way.
I hear you, man.
You're on
Actually,
your way.
is there any lemon water in this cup? I'm thirsty now. No, there's nothing in there.
So the other things are, you can see in the book with J.J. Virgin how to substitute foods that might have trans fats and
That's
sugar.
really important too, because like if you don't know what to substitute something with, you're not going to be long before you start eating it again.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out what to use to get out of that habit as well. That's important.
And you can make a transformation in your life, right? So this can work for children all the way up to people that are 100 years old.
Hey, man,
right?
if it works, it works.
And this information about tapping and tiny habits and knowledge about food and insulin resistance, knowing your numbers of your inflammation, your sugar, your D3, your iron. Okay, these are the tools that you use, right? So you're going through a transition from this lifestyle and habits and information to the other side of the bridge where the new you is already there as a possibility in the field of pure potentiality.
Just get over that hump.
And to go over that bridge, imagine that this bridge is like climbing a mountain, right? And in order to climb a mountain, you have to have certain tools. You have to have, a rope.
Hiking
you have to
boots.
have an
You
axe.
gotta have an
Hiking
axe.
boots.
Right.
So these are your tools.
Okay.
Tapping.
Like that.
And tiny habits are your climbing gear.
Yep.
Right? And this is going to get you to the other side of this steep bridge that you're going to climb.
Right. Don't forget the lemon water.
And don't forget the lemon water along the way.
Exactly.
So you can stay hydrated.
Awesome.
Right? And then the last thing is the issue of sleep, because poor sleep also can lead to insulin resistance, and poor sleep is correlated with people with diabetes.
I actually really don't think I knew that.
And so sleep, we can do a whole show just on the
Yeah,
issue
we'll
of
cover
sleep.
that in another show.
And just in general, you need to know people sleep in 1.5-hour cycles. Your melatonin rises and falls every 1.5 hours. You want to try to sleep complete cycles, right? So if you were to sleep for 2 cycles, you slept for 3 hours. You sleep for 4 cycles, you slept for 6 hours. You sleep for 5 cycles, you've slept for 7.5 hours. So what you don't want to do is set your alarm and go to sleep at 11 o'clock and then set your alarm for 6 o'clock, because you're not in the 1.5-hour cycle if you do something like that. You would want to set your alarm for 6:30, knowing you're going to be asleep at 11.
Okay,
so if it takes you 15 minutes to fall asleep when you get to bed at 10:45, and then you set your alarm for 6:30.
Okay.
And if you're not going to get up at 6:30, you want to add an hour and a half.
Wow.
Right? 7:30, 8. Set your alarm for 8, and then you're going to sleep for 9 hours. They say, well, everybody needs to sleep 8 hours. Actually, not. 8 hours is going to probably wake you up in the middle of a sleep cycle, and you're going to feel groggy for a good part of the day.
Wow.
So you want to try to sleep in these hour and a half cycles, and you want to do it for a minimum of 7.5 hours.
Okay.
Okay. And a big issue people always talk to us about, Rollie, when they call in, well, I don't have any trouble falling asleep, but I can't, when I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't get back to sleep.
Can't fall back asleep.
So number one, if you use our good night formula that Boomers Forever Young has, quite often people will sleep through the night. Mm-hmm. And if not, our favorite trick is relaxing your tongue.
Right. It sounds funny, but it actually works. And I'll give you how I do it. I pretend like you're making a muscle like this, but you do it with your tongue and then let it relax. And I'll let Bob explain why that works. But that's what you do. You tighten your tongue up and then let it relax.
So your tongue is connected to your speech center in your brain, to Brokaw's area. And so when you are thinking, your tongue is actually tense and maybe even moving, right? Even if you're only thinking to yourself and not talking out loud. When Brokaw's area is lit up and active, your brain waves primarily are beta waves, which are your waves of being awake. And you don't want that. You want your beta waves to be small, and you want your delta waves to be bigger, which is your sleep wave.
Okay.
And so by relaxing your tongue, Brokaw's area calms down, your beta waves narrow, and now you can fall back asleep. It's very hard to stay awake when you're relaxing your tongue. It's kind of like trying to keep your eyes open when you sneeze.
Okay.
All right. Now, the other things that people can use for getting back to sleep is manual lymph drainage. Begin to do lymph massage on your neck and your face. And you can follow along on our YouTube channel to learn to do that.
Yeah, we have a video up, lymph drainage on Boomers Forever Young YouTube. So check that out. But go ahead.
Yep. And this also will make you feel sleepy. And it also helps with the detoxification that you are going to be going through as you sleep.
Okay.
Cool. And so I think that's pretty much it. Those are the main things we wanted to get across in this short
I think there's some really good
presentation.
information people might not have realized. The idea of how detrimental not sleeping is for insulin resistance, that's important. And I enjoyed it. One of the things that I can relate to, like I said with my dad earlier, is living through what a type 1 diabetic has to go through. And I'm just glad that the things that we've been able to help him with has really helped make his life that much better. So that's good. I appreciate you going over this for everybody else out there.
Great. Well, thank you, Rollie.
Thanks, Bob.
It's been great. Thanks, everybody, for watching Live Forever Young Radio and listening to Live Forever Young Radio. And we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Live Forever Young Radio. Check us out at liveforeveryoungradio.com.